Hey guys, RW here in the house on Little Mountain. It's time for our afternoon thunderstorm, I guess. And what I'm doing here is I did a deep cleaning on the Il Pieta 1858 Remington cap and ball revolver. And I thought this might be interesting to anybody that owns a gun like this. If you shoot black powder, this is basically what you should break your gun down to after you finish shooting, and wash the entire gun, because black powder is really corrosive. I haven't shot black powder in this gun in quite a while, so when I cleaned it, it was pretty clean. But I wanted to show you some parts and show you how they all go in the gun, and I also wanted to show you parts that you should observe, over the life of your gun for wear, and anything that you see and how to correct it, any deformations or wear. And the problem that I have with most inexpensive guns is the quality of the metal. That's really what you're paying for when you're getting a top quality gun, is really high quality metal. And when you're getting something like this, which back in the day was about $150 from a Sportsman Authority or something, you're getting a good deal for that price, so you can't complain about the quality of what you've got. The finish on the gun is pretty good. It's not perfect. You can see the scratch marks from when they sanded it and everything. It just shows right through the bluing. So it's a rapid process. They're making these guns rapidly. They're not putting a whole lot of effort and time into making an absolutely gorgeous showpiece gun. It's not a Colt. The metal on the frame is a little softer than metal on a lot of other guns. This is the area that would hold the gun together, this part and this part, when it's under battery and being fired. So if you're overpressuring your gun, it's this area that you would want to be inspecting and measuring with a caliper, digital caliper, in between here and here. You're going to want to measure between the barrel and the back of this frame, and check that so you can see if your frame is stretching. Obviously you're going to need a baseline, right? So you should measure that when you first get your gun, and write that down in your little notebook with all your other data, like reloading info or whatever, if you're a gun reloading kind of guy. And now what I'm doing is I've got a conversion cylinder on here. This is made in, I believe, in Wisconsin, RD. Really, really high quality steel. The metal in this cylinder is as good as any metal you may ever find anywhere. It's excellent. The quality of this part far exceeds the quality of the gun, which is why back when this gun cost $150, this cost $250. Okay, and they weren't well known. People didn't really know about these. You kind of had to go out of your way to find one. Now they list them on Midway and stuff, so you can get one easily. You don't have to worry about this part being brass, because this is not a load-bearing part. This is just a trigger guard. Okay, and then you've got your wood grips. So if you wanted to remanufacture wood grips, you can use these as patterns, for instance, or you could refinish these, which I'm thinking I'm going to go down in the shop, sand these, and oil them up. They're a little dirty. The actual part that presses the ball into the powder, okay, is pinned together. There's nothing here that you're going to be able to service, but you can find that this will start to corrode and lock up and get very, very stiff, especially if you do black powder shooting, if you don't clean this really well. So you want to lubricate the two pivot points, and when you reassemble it, you want to lubricate it there. Okay. And that goes in this area here. I'm going to show you pretty much where the parts go. I'm not going to assemble the whole gun at this point, but when you're taking the gun apart, the way to approach taking it apart is you take your grip panels off, and then there'll be a spring right here that holds the hammer in tension. Okay, you loosen a little screw right here, and you can slide this out. Now, for black powder, this spring has got a lot of tension, because it's got to blow a cap. Every time that hammer falls, it's got to fall hard and true and pop a cap, a percussion cap. When you're shooting centerfire ammo, you don't need that kind of tension. As a matter of fact, that kind of tension is really kind of hard on everything. It'll mushroom these little pins eventually and stuff like that. So one thing you can do amateur gunsmithing is you can put this on your belt sander on its side. You don't want it to get hot, so you just press it down on the belt sander and grind a little bit off the side of it to make it springier. Okay, you got to be careful about how much of this you take off. You don't want to take a lot off. You want to take a little bit off. You don't want it to get hot. You want to keep it nice and cool all the time. Always be dipping it in water so it doesn't ruin the tension of this spring. It's very important. But you can adjust this spring by tapering it a little bit more, and you can even run it on the back just a little bit. If you want to improve the way your hammer feels when it rolls, when you're cocking it, this is the contact patch right here between the hammer, which I want to show you has a little tiny roller. Okay, it's got a little roller, and that roller is going to roll back and forth right there. So if there was anything that should be really, really shiny and perfectly smooth, it would be those two areas, the ball and where the hammer contacts. Obviously, anything that pivots, you're going to want to make sure it's super clean, lubricated, and everything. Now, parts of this that wear over time, okay, you're not going to see a heck of a lot of wear on the hammer. Yes, you're going to see a little deformation right there from it striking, but this part is actually fairly hard. This is a nice part, it's case hardened. But you're going to notice that this little lug here, this little angled lug, hey Gray, is going to start to deform a little bit. You're going to keep your eye on that. That's a wear part. Okay, and one of the things that the hammer is attached to, okay, is it's attached to this hand. So when you're taking the whole gun apart, you've taken the spring out, then you take the trigger guard off, then there's a screw there that holds a spring that holds the trigger and the cylinder gate in contact all the time. So you just undo that, and then you can undo this screw and you can remove the cylinder gate, okay, and inspect it for wear. Now, if your cylinder is indexing properly and locking up the way it's supposed to, okay, and everything fits nice, you shouldn't see any scarring on your cylinder. You should see very little drag. Okay, a little bit of drag right there. Okay, I'm going to show it to you better. See the little bit of drag and see that little bit of wear on the edge? Okay, if your gate is not indexing properly to your cylinder, it's going to wear the heck out of your cylinder and ruin it. And luckily, this also is a relatively hard part. Okay, it doesn't show very much wear deformation, but if you see any burrs on this, you might want to take your diamond hound out and very gently lap it and remove any burrs to it, but do not change the profile of this. Okay, that's one thing. Okay, the trigger really doesn't seem to have anything that's going to wear on it. I've looked at it pretty closely. There's a little tiny burring right there, which you might want to dress. Look at it. Again, it's a case hardened part. It's fairly nice. Okay, now the part that really is a disappointment on this gun, okay, which is a very, very important part, is the pawl, which rotates this, okay, it gets in there and it pushes these around. Gets up in there and pushes it. I'm sorry, pushes it. It's what pushes the cylinder around before the cylinder gate grabs it and locks it into place when you're firing it. And what happens is that people with cowboy guns sometimes like to spin the cylinder and hear it go zzz, zzz. Well, that's a terrible thing to do to your gun. You should never do that. This part is working hard enough as it is. And if you want to go and run a cylinder past it so it goes zzz and springs against this relatively strong, this is a relatively strong spring that's keeping this engaged right here, okay, this pawl, this little hand. You're going to put a pig nose on it. You see that pig nose? That's a deformation. It's from the metal being pushed up. Now this is going to happen anyway from the drag, because what this does is this pushes and then it comes back and clicks and drags and pushes and drags and pushes and drags. So it's always in contact with this. There's no way to remove contact from this. So it's always going to be in contact with it. So there's two parts of this that you're going to really want to look at closely. first of all, you want to make sure this is nice and smooth so it's not tearing up your cylinder. And because of all the pushing and the pig nosing action here, it's super smooth this way. Okay? And then when it's trying to push it, okay, to make sure it gets indexed exactly right, you're going to want to make sure that the surface here is flat. And notice how it has a little blob of metal sticking up on it. I'm hoping you can notice that. There's a little tab of metal right there, which I'm going to take off on this in a minute, but I wanted to show it to you. And what that does is that's going to push against that ledge, and it's going to actually make the cylinder move. However far that little tab of metal is how far the cylinder is going to move before the cylinder gate tries to engage. And that's where your wear is going to see that little nick right there. That little nick is almost exactly the same width as this little tip of metal sticking up. Okay, this metal is creating wear here, even though it's actually in contact here because of the relationship of the parts and the timing of the gun. When this comes up, the cylinder has been rotated just a tad too far, and this has to push it back into place. Okay. Now, a lot of this is normal and ordinary, but when you start seeing excessive wear like this, one of the things you should do is first of all, you should get a replacement part. But I can almost guarantee you that when you get a replacement part like this, you're going to have to hand fit it and check the timing of the gun. And unless you know what the heck you're doing, you can really screw up your gun. Because this part, you can see where the grind marks and stuff are on the top. This was hand fit in the factory to assure that the gun timed correctly and that the gate and everything engaged correctly. And that this pushed the cylinder just the right amount. You would take a material off until you were watching the gate come up into the cylinder and so on. So this is a part that you want to not screw with unless you see something really wrong with it. And then if you need to replace it, your best bet is to compare the two parts and get them as close as possible by measuring and comparing them side by side, and then check the timing of the gun very carefully over and over and over and make sure it indexes properly all the way around. So this is the only real problem part. Now another part of the gun, which is often overlooked, especially for black powder shooting, is this barrel pin, which slides in here and traps, the cylinder pin, and this traps the cylinder and lets it rotate. And this is the part that really is going to get gummed up the quickest if you're shooting black powder. It's just going to really cake up in here. I don't know why, it always has. And I think that's why they cut a relief in it. I think part of the reason that relief is so handy is it gives a place for crud to go. You lube the heck out of the thing, and then the lube is basically scraping crud off into this place. So take this out from time to time, and the way you can take that out is when you're taking the loading gate off, because this goes in. Okay, it's not the loading gate. I don't know what you would call it. The loading mechanism for loading black powder into your deal. I'm sorry, I got this upside down. Yeah, there we go. So anyway, here. So this, as you can see, engages in here. Now this is something you want to be able to check for shake. Okay, there shouldn't be a lot of play in here, and I'm feeling play. So that's another wear area. Okay, like I said, the metal on this gun is not the best. The really high wear parts, they made out of case hardened steel. I don't know about this frame, and I don't know about this cylinder pin, but there's a little bit of shake there. Just a little bit. It's not terrible. But if that was really bad, that's going to affect everything on your gun, everything about the performance of your gun. And then this goes in here. See how this would sort of goes, you feed it in like this, but basically. And then you put your screw in and all that. Such a pain in my butt. I can't do this one-handed, guys. I'm going to scratch the finish on my gun or something. But anyway, this part basically slides in here, and the screw traps it. So you just take out one screw, you remove this, you would remove this, and now you can completely clean this. And if you need to see the crud coming off of my fingers, it's still filthy, and get after it maybe with a Scotch-Brite and really, or a wire, a brass brush or something, and really get this super clean. And then light lubrication, not too much. Okay. So when you're putting the gun back together, okay, the first thing you're going to want to do is get the hammer down in here and the little pawl, the little arm that rotates the cylinder, up in there. And then you're going to want to screw them together using a tiny little screw. Okay, and they fit in there like that. Okay, those two parts go together. And put the screw through there. And now you've got your hammer assembly in. So now you can then lay in your trigger assembly, which is nothing more than inserting your trigger, inserting your cylinder gate, trapping those with the screw, then putting the spring on top of them to hold them in tension. Okay, and the spring goes on there, and then covering the whole mechanism with this little brass gate. You just lightly lubricate any parts that touch. Rather than oiling everything that's metal heavily, you can wipe everything that's metal with something like Frog Lube or CLP Break Free or something like that that'll stay on it and protect it. And then all the contact areas, put a dab of regular old axle grease, just like you'd use on an axle in a car. Just a tiny dab of grease so it'll stay in place. And that way you'll have as little crud getting accumulated as possible. And then once you've got your trigger assembly in, your hammer assembly in, then you go ahead and you put your spring back in, and then you can put your loading mechanism and your cylinder pin back in, and then you put your grip panels back in, then you can check the action of the gun. Okay. Do not allow the hammer to fall, okay, on either this conversion cylinder pins. It'll mushroom them. Don't just slam this. It's not good. And you can also, you don't want to do that on the nipples of your black powder cylinder. It'll just destroy them. So you're going to want to cycle it by hand, okay? Not let the hammer fall. This is not the kind of gun you dry fire. All right, guys, I hope that that was some edification about the Remington 1858. This is an Il Pieta, but they're all basically the same. They're all going to have the same components. They're going to have the same configuration. They're all based on the same pattern. And so there's really not that many parts to it. There's nothing that's that confusing or complex about it. And it comes apart nicely, and it goes back together nicely, and it's designed to come apart and go together all the time, because when you're black powder shooting, these parts need to come off. Everything needs to be cleaned, oiled, put back in so it doesn't rust. And you need a kit like this. You need very specific sized screw tips. You need the exact right sized blade. You don't want to just use a hairy homeowner screwdriver set on your gun ever. Don't do it. Don't do it, guys. Okay? You need special screw tips that fit the screws precisely. And that's how you can take it apart and put it back together. When you're retightening this, don't do it to a dying strain. None of this metal is that great. This is not aerospace grade metal. You just want to snug it down, because you're going to be taking it apart pretty soon. And just make sure all your screws stay tight every now and then. Just check your screws, make sure everything stays tight. Alright, guys? Alright, that's it on the Remington 1858 Il Pieta. Mine has a conversion cylinder from RD. And it's a great gun. I've had this gun for over 10 years. I love it. It shoots awesome. Okay. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. And thanks for subscribing to my channel and for your comments. And I've got something special coming up for the 4th of July, so I hope you all stay tuned for that.